Keep it rolling. We'll come back.
Don't worry.
We'll come
Give
back.
it a second.
It
Give it a
feels so
second.
good.
Here we go.
It feels so good.
Here it is. Here it is. We're gonna let it roll a little bit longer. Just a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Man, oh man.
Spike there.
I missed it.
I know. It's been, hey, you know what? This has been the longest stretch the Celtics have gone without a win in a long time. Guys, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Celtics Talk Weekly postgame show. I am your host, Rob Haytayan. Joined with me are my two co-hosts, Seamus Zarlingo and Nick Franco. Guys, the Celtics, after falling short on Christmas at the TD Garden, they were dropping two straight. The Celtics, they came back home tonight and they took care of business. A bounce back statement win from Jaylen Brown and company. 142-105 was your final score tonight from TD. Guys, we got a lot to dive into, a lot to dissect. Obviously, we're going to go into initial thoughts. I just want to give a quick stat here because this was on my mind all day today. Now, coming into this game, guys, the last time the Celtics had lost 3 games in a row was 647 days ago. Now,
wow.
All day I was thinking, oh God, it's been so long. What do we do? How do I take this? Last time they lost 3 games in a row, Marcus Smart was still on this team. Malcolm Brogdon was on this team. Grant Williams was on this team. Total different vibe, guys. I had to throw that out there. The Celtics streak continues. We're going to 247 tomorrow, guys, when we wake up. But let's get started, guys. Our initial thoughts, reactions, and takeaways from tonight's blowout win.
Imagine if we had to talk about that stat and actually go into fruition about it. But we didn't get to talk about Christmas on Celtics Postgame Live, but it was such a bounce back win. I think that taking that loss on Christmas was a kick in the ass to the team. They really got their stuff together, getting on the road, and they looked like the team that we're accustomed to seeing from last year. And when we saw that championship run, it seemed like the losses that they've taken recently were taken personally. Everyone was firing on all cylinders. We saw all 12 players who were active tonight contributing in their own fashions and being able to find their roles within the team. We obviously saw our star players step in. Jaylen Brown with a huge performance tonight. He really stepped up and was that energy shifter that we're so accustomed to. And we were texting in the group chat talking about if we were going to be concerned or not, if we were concerned or not, even after the loss to Philly. And all of our problems were answered tonight. And as long as it continues, I think we're seeing them, as he said once, the energy is about to shift. I feel like this was a monumentous energy shifter for this team going forward.
For the Celtics, this was a game they had to win because if you look at the Pacers' recent schedule, now they win 5 straight and they go on a West Coast road trip where they pretty much sweep the entire trip. They do sweep the entire trip. They come home in a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, lose a close one last night to OKC, and then they fly up to Boston tonight to play the Celtics, who have lost the last 3 of their last 4 games. And the Celtics, looking at the Pacers' schedule and where the Celtics are right now within their schedule, which is a little bit of a weird stretch here. Played 2 games in 11 days, then you come back, you lose 3 of 4, you lose 1 on Christmas, a huge game against the Philadelphia 76ers, and now you play not a back-to-back, but another 2-game series against the Indiana Pacers. This was a game in which the Celtics had to pull out because of the circumstances surrounding not only their ball club, but the Pacers ball club as well. No Aaron Nesmith tonight, no Andrew Nembhard, no Drew Holiday, no Kristaps Porzingis. You still look at the Celtics and go, they have the bigger absences, but where the Pacers are in their schedule and who they were missing, some of their energy spark plugs tonight, the Celtics had to come out and show what they're really made of, especially considering the conversation we've seen in the past couple of days regarding the Celtics, because I believe I mentioned 2 post games ago after the Magic game, if they came out and lost the Christmas game against the Philadelphia 76ers, people in the national media would start talking about the Boston Celtics and their struggles, especially being the second seed closer to the third seed now than they are the first seed, losing 3 of the last 4. And guess what? The Boston Celtics, what was the narrative these last couple of days? Are there concerns surrounding the Boston Celtics, not only from the media locally in Boston, but nationally as well? When everybody saw that loss on Christmas to the Philadelphia 76ers, who everybody's been putting down for the first portion of the season, it started to make its way, the Celtics narrative of, oh, are we supposed to be concerned about the Celtics at this point in time? Started to leak its way into the national spotlight a little bit. And now, after this win, of course, this was not a nationally televised game, but what the Celtics presented tonight is the fact the Celtics are still the best team constructively in the entire NBA. And when they're playing their A game, quarters 1 to quarters 4, that is when the Celtics can dominate any opponent on any given night. And tonight's game, this was ultra impressive from the Celtics, considering they played a full 48 minutes, which is what we've wanted to see them do lately, because we've seen stretches of greatness followed by stretches of complacency that we want to see this team get rid of. And I'll say, after this game as well, the next game against the Indiana Pacers in a couple days from now, still at the TD Garden, still back at home, Indiana with a little bit more rest now and a game plan to play against the Celtics with. After this game, they have a lot more film. That'll be a big contest as well for the Boston Celtics. So huge win tonight, but another huge one on the horizon against the Indiana Pacers.
It was the 2024 NBA championship, Boston Celtics finally getting back out on the floor and playing basketball. That's what it was. It was probably our most complete game of the season. From an offensive and defensive standpoint, the Celtics never let up. They kept the pushing, the lead kept growing, and as a result, the starters got to check out with 8 minutes left in the quarter. It made my life easier. It made their life easier. I mean, it was a great bounce back win. It was one you needed after coming on your home floor on Christmas and letting those fans down, losing to the Philadelphia 76ers the way you did. It was a very important game tonight for the Celtics. They answered the call like they have for the past 2 years. So very promising win. I will say, Seamus, I agree with you. A lot more important games ahead because the Celtics haven't just played 1 or 2 bad games this month. It's been a bad month of basketball, and they have a couple of opportunities here against the Indiana Pacers yet again, and I believe the Toronto Raptors back at home on the 31st. They have an opportunity here to close out the month on a mini 3-game win streak and on a positive note going into the new year. I was very pleased with seeing this team succeed outside of Jason Tatum tonight in the non-Jason Tatum minutes. We're going to talk about it later. It was very important. But, guys, something we have to look at was the 2024 Celtics NBA champions being back on the floor, guys. Let's take a look at this lead tracker. Guys, for the first time this season, I believe, somebody fact check me on this, we can finally say wire to wire win for the Boston Celtics, guys. Their biggest lead of the night was 38. They did not find themselves trailing at all in this game. A sea of green, guys. This is the type of lead tracker we've been wanting to see, we love to see, and we are happy to see from the Boston Celtics moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacers haven't been looking like the team that we're accustomed to seeing, especially after the Eastern Conference Finals last year. It seems like they've kind of taken a step back. However, they're still the team that we faced off in the Eastern Conference Finals, and I guarantee this isn't well, we're obviously seeing them on Sunday, but I believe they're going to get their things together and they're going to be able to make a playoff run. But these are the types of teams that are, quote unquote, the Celtics kryptonites. These younger teams who are starting to be on the uprise, who are developing into their roles. And obviously, they were missing a few key players on the court, Nemhard and Neesmith. And I think we'll start to see a lot more of these types of games going forward from the Boston Celtics, where you're getting the contributions from your other players, and I don't want to say that it hinders the Celtics when they have a fully healthy roster, but people are playing a little bit more into their roles when a couple of players are off the court and they are able to access those extra minutes. You look at a guy like Peyton Pritchard, who had a breezy triple-double tonight, and it was contributing on both ends, offensive rebounds. He was dogging those out tonight. And we're starting to see a lot more of that going forward. And that's what we were accustomed to seeing with the Celtics over the past year. And I don't even know who the guys were on the court during the first 30 games of the season, but I, I think we're starting to see that click again. And I think it really took that, okay, we have our backs against the wall the type of mentality instead of the kiss the ring mentality. Oh, we got our championship. We don't have to worry about that. We'll be in the playoffs. We'll see you in May no matter what. That's not how the NBA works, especially nowadays. When you're going for a back to back, you need to be better than you were the year before. You need to be able to say that if we lined up the 2023-24 Celtics versus the 24-25 Celtics, that the 24-25 Celtics would win that 7-game series. And I think what we saw tonight is a telltale sign of what's to come from this team, and especially with the improvements we've seen from the players, especially all the way down to the depth of Sam Hauser and Peyton Pritchard and Luke Cornett, who's filled in big tonight. I think he's established himself as that backup center behind Al Horford when Chris Sapp or Al are taking a night off. We'll see him start to have those types of nights, and we're very lucky to have them have these types of wins. And I think that clipboard, I made a joke about a clipboard being broken on a couple of heads this morning. And I think that happened during that practice. They definitely had to run a couple of suicides after that Christmas loss. And I think it really woke up this team, and we're going to see that new energy applied to the rest of the season.
Well, let's bring this up because 2 years ago, we talked about on this post-game show what really we saw within the 21-22 Celtics and what we saw in them really turning the ship around from that putrid start to the season. Everybody remembers the 21-22 Celtics. They were 18-21 to start the season, yet they made it all the way to the NBA Finals once June rolled around. And what did we always look at with that team late in the season that made us believe in that team so heavily? They responded to every lull in which they had. And this recent stretch by the Celtics, losing 3 of the last 4, this is not something we're used to at all with this particular Celtics team. The 23-24 Celtics team leading into the 24-25 Celtics team, essentially the same team. The last stretch was awful, putrid. You lost 3 games in which you quite frankly should have won. Against the Sixers without Jared McCain, against the Bulls at home, against the Magic without Boncaro and Franz Wagner. Those are all games the Celtics should have won, yet the Celtics, how did they come out tonight when the spotlight is put on them all of a sudden? Because the Bulls in the Magic game, we were giving them a little bit of a pass, maybe less so after the Magic game. But after the Sixers game, the alarm bells were going off all over the place, not only locally, but nationally, as I mentioned earlier. And tonight, the Celtics came out and responded as a championship level team. And I completely agree, Rob. Earlier in the day, I wasn't thinking of the stat you were thinking of, but I was thinking, what, 3 in a row? We haven't lost 3 in a row in a long time. And also, let's mention this at home. 11-5 at home this year. I heard a stat earlier. We only lost 4 games at home all of last season.
Right.
Lost 5 games already before the new year this season. And that certainly paints a different picture for the Celtics and one that they have to respond to. And we talked about it last post game, the assist to turnover ratio for the Celtics. Last game, it was 13 assists to 18 turnovers, just completely uncharacteristic from the Boston Celtics. I shouldn't say last game, it was against the Orlando Magic. That was the game. Tonight, the Boston Celtics passed to 31 assists, just an astronomical number for assists. And you add on top of that only 9 turnovers for the team tonight while they forced 13. And even last game, they were terrible at forcing turnovers against the Philadelphia 76ers, only forced 6 the entire game, which was a season low for the Sixers. Yet tonight we saw, particularly in the first half and even in the second quarter, when the Celtics were going on their run, building on the lead continuously, like we saw in that lead tracker, the turnovers and points off of turnovers were big for the Celtics, particularly Jaylen Brown coming up with some of those points off of turnovers. It felt like he was just a safety playing on defense tonight at some portions of this game. But the way the Celtics responded in their entirety, you look at the turnover numbers, you look at the assist numbers, you really look at every number from this game opposed to the last couple of games, particularly the last 4 games. Maybe take out that Saturday in Chicago because we thought, oh, that was a great response. Then they dropped 2 after that. This game was a game the Celtics needed to play, and you could certainly see the recent stretch was maybe a little bit of a wake-up call for them. But as I said earlier, they're going to have to play more games like this for us to really heighten that belief in them again, because constructively, they're still the greatest team in the NBA as of right now, but they have to actually go out there and prove it. And this was the first, I don't want to say the first necessarily, but one of the lowest building blocks on the pyramid that'll eventually lead up into what we think could be a back-to-back title run.
Absolutely. And I think, right, kind of pulling from what both of you guys said, Franco, you mentioned being better this year. I love that, right? You got to, this team, if they want to go back to back, they have to beat last year's team. And Seamus, for the topic of responding, the Celtics wouldn't just respond after a loss the last year, especially last year. The other teams prior doesn't really matter anymore. But last year, they wouldn't just respond with 1 win, right? They would come out and they would rip off 6 or 7 in a row. Oh, I mean, you can go through the game log, and I was actually looking at it this morning. After a loss, it was like, oh, a 6-game win streak before their next loss, 7-game win streak, because they understood that that one loss was a chain reaction to a consistent stretch of good basketball. We really haven't seen that this month from Boston. We've seen them, like you said, against Chicago, respond, but then they drop 2. And those are some old habits, those complacency habits. Right now, I don't think I can confidently say that this year's Celtics team is better than last year's Celtics team, because they really just haven't been. And I do think that an entire month of good dominant basketball is necessary right now for me to feel uber confident about this team going back to back, because of just what history the past 6 seasons rather, have kind of shown me right now in the NBA that, listen, there's been a lot of great teams, the 21 Bucks, the 23 Nuggets, the 22 Warriors, less so, a little salty about that one, but we've seen some great teams in the NBA who the next year were the favorites. I mean, let's not forget, guys, Denver all last year was picked throughout the entire season. They're the favorites. They're the dominant team. They got the experience. Jokic is that guy. They're going to get to the playoffs. And, they got in the second round. And, right now, I'm not saying this Celtics team is going to get bounced in round 2. What I'm saying is that they're definitely not better than they were last year. And I don't know if they've played to the same standard that they did last year. Luckily for these guys, there's a lot of basketball left, and they're really like Seamus, like I completely agree with you. They are the greatest constructed roster in the league, right? They are still the favorites. They're still the team to beat. However, they got to get some of those good habits back. And when we talk about good habits and getting them back, guys, that brings me a beautiful segue into my player spotlight, the SeatGeek player spotlight of the game, guys. It was so needed. Jaylen Brown tonight, a dominant, a career performance from JB. Guys, before I talk about JB, though, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of the post-game show, SeatGeek. Guys, SeatGeek is the best ticketing app out there on the market, with a phenomenal system that shows you whether or not your ticket that you are buying is worth it being green or not worth it being red. Guys, a huge shout out to SeatGeek for sponsoring us this season. Use code Celtics Weekly at checkout to get $20 off your first purchase. That link will be the top link in the description down below. Guys, let's talk about Jaylen Brown tonight. He answered. Tonight, we saw finals MVP Jaylen Brown come back to action and take the court for the Celtics at the TD Garden. 44 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 4 steals. Like Seamus said, he was playing free safety out there. Very efficient shooting from the floor and behind the arc. Guys, Jaylen Brown has been a heavy topic of conversation this season in particular about his up and down play. He's kind of having a career low as of the past 4 years from shooting wise. He has been inefficient at scoring. His 3-point shot hasn't been there. Tonight, he was doing it all. He was being that energy shifter. It trickled down while being able to put up high scoring numbers, 44 points. Guys, we look at Jaylen Brown. I'm not really worried too much about tonight. Obviously, I'm looking for what you guys thought about him tonight, but I want to know more specifically what he needs to do and what he needs to carry over from tonight in order to keep playing at this sort of level?
Well, obviously we're not going to be expecting a 44-point performance out of him every night. However, that would be nice if he could give that to us.
Wouldn't mind
But
it.
he is one of those people that gets infected by the hot hand, and we've seen that in recent history. When he's not shooting well, that's usually a sign that it's gonna be a couple of games like that, and he's gonna have a couple of inconsistent performances. But once he has one of those games, especially like tonight, that's when the ball really starts rolling for him, and that's when you can start seeing him get more activated. There were a lot of conversations that has Jaylen Brown been playing up to his standards of recent past? Have we not seen Jaylen Brown putting up the same performances? Is he dealing with that hip flexor injury? He put that all to rest tonight. I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of these types of performances out of him. He's one of those players that's a little bit more um, on a wavelength than Jason Tatum is. We see Jason Tatum, he's usually on a more of a tight line of consistency. But when Jaylen
That's
Brown,
new too, real quick. That's new. That hasn't always been the case. That's a very 2024, 2025 thing, I feel like.
yeah, and that's honestly something that we need to see from him if he wants to make his MVP case. But if Jaylen Brown wants to make his All NBA, All Star, Team USA case, even though Team USA is in 2028, but if he wants to make his cases as a top 15, top 20 player in the NBA, he needs to have these types of performances. And we've seen him be able to create some energy. Tonight was a perfect example. It seemed like he had the team fully engaged. When Jaylen Brown is playing well, we see the players start to react positively around that, even though usually when he's in a game where he has to score high points, usually we've seen it not work out in our favor a few times. And I think if he plays this team ball and plays within the role, and it's not mitigating or not taking away from any of the other players on the court, because we saw Drew Holiday, Kristaps were out, and that's when people are going to be able to see more shot opportunities like Jaylen Brown, like Derek White, like Kristaps, like Pritchard, and we'll start to. That's when the shots start to fall, and I'm not saying injuries are good for this team, but those opportunities to get those shots up are. And I'm happy that he was able to take full advantage of that tonight.
Well, this was not only Jaylen Brown's best game of the season, but this was one of Jaylen Brown's best games of his entire career. Entire career. And it was his third highest scoring game of his career. And Jaylen Brown tonight, he started the game 9 of 9 from the floor. And even if you think afterwards, he shot 7 of 15 from the floor after starting 9 of 9. So you start on just this unsustainable clip. No player is going to shoot 100% over time. But Jaylen Brown goes on this crazy clip to start the game. And not only that, throughout the rest of the game, still shoots efficiently 7 of 15 for the rest of the game. So Jaylen Brown not only had it going early tonight, but throughout the night. And really, the last 3 games are a positive sign from Jaylen Brown. Take out that first half against the Philadelphia 76ers and the way Jaylen Brown played in the Orlando game, the way he played in the second half versus the Sixers, and in the way he played tonight is the consistent Jaylen Brown and the energetic Jaylen Brown this team needs. And we talked about it a couple post games ago where we said, look, Jaylen Brown, he is really a focal point of this Celtics team. Yes, the entire offense runs through Jason Tatum, but Jaylen Brown has that trickle down effect from the energy he brings to the floor, both offensively and defensively. And this month, and even this year for Jaylen Brown, it's been up and down, up and down. So the last 3 games have certainly been, it's been optimistic, or there's been a sense of optimism surrounding Jaylen Brown, because the 4 games before the last 3, he really looked like just a normal role player for the Celtics. He was playing 31 minutes per game, averaging 15.8 points per game, 5 assists per game, 5 rebounds per game. He was shooting 20% from 3 and 41% from the floor. So that was the 4 games before the last 3 game stretch. That was the Detroit game when the Celtics won by 24. That was the Washington game where they won by 14. The first Chicago game where the Celtics lost, and then the second Chicago game where, of course, Jaylen Brown, he did shoot 9 of 20 in that game. We did give him flowers that night, although our flowers, not Justin's flowers. You said Justin's flowers,
It
but
was ours.
but Justin,
We
he was
got
more on the
Justin's tonight,
Kristaps
though.
Porzingis
We
strain.
got Justin's tonight. We got it
But
right.
even amidst that stretch, it feels like we were glossing over Jaylen Brown's struggles a little bit, because you look at some of these wins within that stretch: 24-point win, 14-point win, another 25-point win. We did lose a game within that stretch of Jaylen Brown struggling against the Chicago Bulls, but it seems like that little 4-game lull right there from Jaylen Brown was glossed over just a tad. And really, Jaylen Brown, that conversation around Jaylen Brown this year has been, can he consistently get it going? In the last 4 games, it really fell back down. I don't even say it fell back down to earth for Jaylen Brown. He went underground with some of these numbers: 20% from three at the last 2 games, or really the last 3 games. He goes out and scores 35 in Orlando. He's clearly the Celtics' best player in that game with Jason Tatum off the floor. Jaylen Brown is the best player. And then on Christmas, he goes off in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter, or sorry, not the fourth quarter, the third quarter on Christmas. He was really a spearhead alongside Jason Tatum, like we talked about, in making that comeback for the Celtics on Christmas. Unfortunately, they fell back into another hole, couldn't complete the comeback whatsoever. But when the Celtics made 2 comebacks in that game to make the game close, it was Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both leading the charge. And Jaylen Brown, how he played in that second half, how he played in Orlando, and how he played tonight, particularly early in the game, where it just felt like he was a dominant player tonight. Not only a great player tonight, he was dominant. Forget top 15 player in the league right now. If Jaylen Brown plays the way he played early in this game, and even throughout the game, you can consider him in the top 10 conversation for players in the NBA, because he is really that good on both ends of the floor. And Jaylen Brown, super deserving of player of the game tonight. That shooting line: 16 of 24, 44 points. That's just unbelievable from JB, especially considering we thought, Jason Tatum, he's been on the stretch of this month. 43 points in Chicago, 32 against the Sixers back-to-back games. Of course, he didn't play the Magic game. But Jaylen Brown, he's really starting to turn up as well. 35 points against the Magic, 44 tonight. If both of those guys can get going, that's when the Celtics, we're going to see a lot more of that lead tracker in the sea of green in the future.
Tonight, it felt like JB was doing it within the flow of the offense, too. And this is no discredit to Jaylen Brown, but he's a flamethrower, right? When he goes for these high point games, it feels like about 15 of them come in bunches, just one big bunch where he just catches fire to start the game, starts off right. It's just a big burst of energy from Jaylen Brown. Tonight, it was kind of just like it was there. He's getting steals, getting easy buckets, getting open looks within the flow of the offense. That's what you want to see. Yes, or the Orlando type of performance, right, where he's just scoring in bunches is awesome, but he was doing it and the ball was still touching everyone's hands. Jaylen Brown against Orlando, guys, 35 points on 13 team assists, like you said, Seamus. Tonight, how about 44 points on 31 team assists? Jaylen Brown was phenomenal at just scoring within the flow, getting the easy buckets, getting to his spots, trusting his teammates to get him the ball. And the teammates, credit to them, they got him the ball. They read the room. They knew that he was the hot hand. They kept finding him. Those are what great teams do. They can get their big-time stars the ball within the flow of the offense. The Celtics, they did that tonight. They found the hot hands, and it showed in the box score. Guys, quick shout-out to Jaylen Brown for being the Sports Illustrated Player of the Year. That feels like something we need to talk about, because the dude has had a phenomenal 2024. I mean, with just a couple days left, the dude has been Eastern Conference Finals MVP, Finals MVP. I mean, just an NBA champion. He's contributed on and off the floor. I mean, he really has had a phenomenal 2024. Transcended his game, it felt like. So big shout out to JB for the Sports Illustrated Player of the Year, guys.
Sitting next to WNBA baddies at Summer League too. Don't forget about that. I mean, come on. It doesn't even have to be within that realm either.
I mean, Jaylen Brown has just
on and off the court.
Yeah, just winning on and off the floor. I mean, no, seriously, though, big shout out to JB for the year he's had. Hopefully he continues to, keep that moving, keep that going forward. I do want to just touch on one more thing that you said, Seamus, because I think it's a really, really good point. Something we've talked about really as the year has progressed so far, and that is getting Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum going, right? And it feels like maybe we're starting to see that on their play recently. We know how good Derek White, although really we're going to talk about Derek White in a little bit later on this episode. He has not been so hot this year, but we know how good our role players can be. Peyton Pritchard, Porzingis, Holiday, White. I mean, the list goes on. But what makes this Celtics team so special are their two superstars, Tatum and Brown. We're starting to see it now. We've seen it from Tatum kind of as the years progressed here consistently. Brown is kind of starting to get fire again. How good, guys, are these two guys, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum? Are they both top 10? I'm sorry. I just need to know. Are they both in that realm? Because we know Tatum. But personally, the year Jaylen Brown has had, I mentioned Sports Illustrated Player of the Year. That's not nothing. I really do believe this guy is in that top 12 realm of NBA players.
Well, I avoid talking about hypotheticals because Justin will just spawn out of nowhere and start saying radio boy and calling me out on my bad takes. But imagine if Jaylen Brown was on another team this year. I think he would be having the types of performances that Tatum's been having, and he would be able to carry a team. I don't think we would be seeing the inconsistency as much out of Jaylen Brown, and I think he really knows how to be a captain on a team. So I think what would be a good random team just flop him on to. Let's throw him on
the Atlanta Hawks.
If he was on the Atlanta Hawks right now, the Atlanta Hawks would be in a better position. I would say they would be a top 4 team in the East, and they would be competing with us when it gets down to the second or third round, just because of the character that he brings to the table and the skill that he brings to both sides of the floor. When you have someone who is a star level player making as much money as he is, still making hustle plays and carrying the transition offense throughout the game and honestly throughout the season, like he has for the Boston Celtics, that as your second option is almost unfair to anyone else. And it kind of hurt. It doesn't hurt Brown that he's on the super team of a lot of talent, but it kind of just equates him and doesn't really. He would just stand out anywhere else. That's the sum
That's
of it all.
something me and Seamus talked about just the other night, was the uniqueness of the upbringing of Jaylen Brown to stardom. This guy was a role player. He is not like other stars. He has needed to gain the intangibles and the little things to become a star and to get his flowers. So I feel like that's the uniqueness you get out of JB, and not many stars have that. We've said that. We've talked about that before, Seamus.
Yeah, and also I'll bring up this conversation we talked about the other night where we're saying, well, Jason Tatum, he is kind of negated in the MVP conversation just a little bit because of the team he's on, and he's disrespected in the MVP conversation because of the team he's on. Well, we talked about that with Jason Tatum in the MVP conversation and the top 5 conversation, particularly in regards to Tatum. Yet with Jaylen Brown, we can bring that up for him in the conversation of top 10 player in the NBA. I believe if Jaylen Brown, speaking hypothetically, of course, as Franco said, if he was on another team, he would be more in that conversation of, is he a top 10 NBA player? Yet when he slotted behind Jason Tatum on the Celtics, and the rest of the Celtics are such a good team, I think Jaylen Brown, the talents of Jaylen Brown, they're looked over a lot because we always think, oh, Jason Tatum, oh yeah, and they have White and Holiday and Porzingis, and they have this just bunch of riches everywhere else, and Peyton Pritchard emerging as the 6th man of the year. Yet people forget you need multiple superstars at the top of your roster in order to win a championship like the Celtics did last season. And of course, the finals MVP was Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown won finals MVP because he was the best player in that series. He was the best player in the conference finals. And of course, Jason Tatum played a huge part as well. But Jaylen Brown, if he wasn't there, who knows what happens with last year's Celtics team? Are they as dominant? Do they still win the title? Speaking completely hypothetically here, as we have to do with the embarrassment of riches the Celtics have, but it's the same conversation with Jaylen Brown as it is for Jason Tatum in terms of best player in the league or top 10 player in the league. They're both looked over in a lot of conversations because of the talent around them and the team the Celtics are. But ultimately, they are the catalyst of what makes the Celtics machine run. And if the Celtics didn't have those top two superstar players in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, the Celtics team would not be the same whatsoever. And Jaylen Brown this year, he's been up and down, but we see the consistent stretches when he can really get it going. After a couple wake up calls, we think last year didn't start the season so hot, but in December, once it was really in his mind that I need to turn up my level here, which right now I believe the whole team is on after this recent stretch of losing 3 of the last
Right.
4, but particularly with Jaylen Brown, when he has that motivation that, oh, I'm not only going to be a scorer here, I'm going to be a playmaker. I'm going to play within the offense as we saw tonight. I'm going to be a good defender because we have seen stretches in Jaylen Brown's career where he's a great defender, but sometimes might become a little bit complacent as superstars do from time to time. But when he is on his game, he can certainly be a top 10 player in the NBA, no doubt.
That's so funny that you say catalyst, because you can go on our Instagram and you can scroll down on the reel section just about 2-3 months now, and you will find a video called captioned catalyst with a picture of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown standing next to each other, where we talk about that. And that is like that they are, and Jaylen Brown really is the catalyst for what makes the Celtics so special. And we talk about Tatum this year has been kind of the magician behind the Celtics offense. He has kind of been the guy that is kind of finagling the strings of this team. He's done a phenomenal job at that. But what gets underlooked, and I'll take it with my chest, I underlook it and undervalue it sometimes with Jaylen Brown, is the other things he does that Tatum doesn't. Brown gets these guys up ready for war. Brown gets these guys ready to go. He's really stepping up into this lead of the vocal leader, and I think that should not get underlooked. I completely agree with you. He is in that category of top 10. You look at him, I think he's better than Brunson. I think he's in the conversation to be up there with guys like Anthony
Brunson
Edwards.
can't defend. We
Yeah,
got a 6'6" wing in Jaylen Brown who can look at tonight, 4 steals. Pacers can't get by him.
And I think it's not crazy to say that Jaylen Brown is a top 5 two-way player in this league. So I mean, really, it is very easy to underlook and undervalue what Jaylen Brown means to the Celtics team. But you look at his upbringing, you look at his rise to stardom. It is truly unique, and it is very, very, very deserved that Jaylen Brown had won Sports Illustrated Player of the Year. Kind of going back to that. So big shout out to Jaylen Brown there. But we've had this segment here for, I want to say, 4 games, and we have yet to get it right. But tonight, guys, we celebrate. We celebrate the Celtics win, and we celebrate Justin's flowers. Tonight, Peyton Pritchard is the winner of Justin's flowers, guys. Before we talk about Peyton Pritchard, I just want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of the segment, Bucket Squad. Guys, Bucket Squad has the best basketball apparel in the game. I am wearing their shorts right now. If you're hooping, if you're working out, if you want casual wear, they're comfortable, and they are so affordable. Guys, second link in the description. Go check out Bucket Squad and use code Celtics Talk Weekly for 10% off your order at checkout. Guys, Peyton Pritchard, Franco, I can see it and I'm loving it. Wear it proud. The Peyton Pritchard.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have any flowers, but I'll be the flower tonight.
This is amazing.
As you can tell, Franco got his equipment upgraded for Christmas, and he's got the Peyton Pritchard, he's got the green screen Peyton Pritchard going on right now, and I'm all for it. Guys, tonight, I won't lie, we were talking in the group chat with Justin, and we said, Justin, who you picking for your flowers? And he goes, oh, Peyton Pritchard. And I watched the game. I watched every possession of this game, and I was like, oh, Peyton Pritchard, like, okay, like, maybe I'm missing something. I checked the box score, and he has 12 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. And I'm like, what? And, we've had this conversation before about P, and I think this is not going to be the last time we have it. But, what exactly is Peyton Pritchard? Because, like, he has games like this, right? 18, 8, and 10. And then sometimes he has those, bench games. So, like, are we too hard on Peyton Pritchard from how good he can get?
I don't think so. I think we've been praising him as much as we possibly could recently. I mean, the amount of times he's been above our head for the player
Literally right
spotlight.
now. Literally right
He's
now.
right. He's right behind me, isn't he?
Franco is getting an arm workout right now, holding that green screen up.
But he's been doing something that we weren't expecting. Actually, if we go back to the preseason post-game shows, I said that Peyton Pritchard was due to make a run for sixth man of the year alongside Randy, and you called us crazy for saying it.
I did. I
And
didn't even say Peyton Pritchard was the sixth man on this team. I will admit
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow. Now he's like the clear favorite. That could not work out.
Yeah,
worse.
you know, in this
Or
industry, you
good,
have
I
some
should say.
good takes and you have some bad takes. I have my fair share of bad takes. I'll take that.
But the performance that we saw tonight was unlike his performances when he's having those 27-point games and he's just the hot hand. Tonight he was contributing in all factors of tonight's game. He was all over the court, being able to make plays during the final countdown. I believe was it the either second or third quarter. He was able to get a cleanup rebound against, I believe it was Isaiah Jackson, and it was down low. And I wasn't expecting him to make that play, and it was a very, very tough layup that he was able to make. And it just shows the grittiness that he's been able to add to his game so far this season. He's stepped up in multiple different factors. I think we're starting to see him come into his own as a player in this league, and I'm really just happy to see that he's starting to figure this out and not just being a point scorer for this team, because we have plenty of those, but he's able to almost respond to whatever the Celtics need. He's almost that answer off the bench. That's why the conversations about if the Celtics should move him up to the starting rotation at some point in his career. I think that the six-man spot is perfect for him because he knows what he needs to do once he gets out there. It's almost like he gets to have the overview of the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, and then he gets out there, picks his foot in, and he's able to make the other team drink it.
Well, I'll give a little bit of a different answer from Franco's in terms of us being tough on him because I do believe because of what he's been able to do this season, there are moments in which we look at Pritchard and we go, there is an increased reliance on Pritchard to come up and perform with the team in order for the Celtics to actually go out there and blow out teams. And that's where I do believe we are just a little bit tougher on him or tough on the Celtics in their entirety because we've seen and expected a lot more from Peyton Pritchard as time has moved on this season. However, most of our conversation in regards to Pritchard has been positive because most of his performances are on that spectrum of positivity and contributing to the Celtics. Now, yes, there are a couple rough stretches, but that's where I do believe we can be tough on them during those 7-point games, during those 10-point games where we go, we saw 20-point Pritchard, 20-point P earlier this season. Where's that at? And if the Celtics don't have it from Pritchard, who else are they getting it from? We can be tough on him in that sense, but really alleviating expectations there. This is the Pritchard that every night, if the Celtics get this Pritchard we saw tonight, almost the triple-double Pritchard, of course, 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists, really 2 rebounds away. I'm surprised he missed the triple-double by 2 rebounds because it felt like he was all over the glass tonight, all over the glass. And again, super efficient shooting line too, 7 of 16, only 4 of 11 from 3. Now we know one of those was a heave right before half, so we always have to mark that in for Pritchard, of course. But Peyton Pritchard in his all-around game tonight, and really for this season, if the Celtics are getting this type of Peyton Pritchard every single night, where he is scoring the ball and dishing out those assists, that's when the Celtics can really combine with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. If they're on their game, that's when we see the lead tracker like we saw earlier in this post game, where it's just a complete and utter collapse. I shouldn't say collapse, an avalanche. That's what I wanted to use, not a collapse. We saw a collapse last game, unfortunately. An avalanche of green. And really, Pritchard, he is one of the most active players on this Celtics team. Just in looking at the entire roster, we think about Jaylen Brown as a super active player. We think about Derek White on the defensive end of the floor, although he's had his struggles this season. But really, who's made up for that if those guys aren't on their game or if the rest of the team is just going through the motions? It feels like Peyton Pritchard is always pushing the pace, always getting into the grill of who he's defending one-on-one. He is always offensively looking to score the ball or make a play for somebody else, and even getting those offensive rebounds. I thought those were huge tonight for the Celtics as a whole. The offensive rebounds, particularly in the first half, seems like they were just racking up the second chance points in that regard. Now, maybe the stat sheet doesn't say it, which I'm a little confused on a night tonight where they account for second chance points, because you'll see a team, you think, oh, they have a lot of second chance points. You go in there, oh, they have 4, oh, they have 6 second chance points. But it felt like the Celtics were getting some of those second chance opportunities, and they were coming from solely Peyton Pritchard and a guy like, of course, Jaylen Brown tonight as well. And Pritchard, for what he's been with this team this season, he's gone beyond expectations. But as we're seeing consistently, he is more on this spectrum of putting up these type of performances. Maybe not so much triple double, but if he's making this sort of impact every single night, the Celtics, they're just a different level of a team than they were last season. Now, we haven't seen that as a whole the entirety of this season so far, but we know the components that exist on the Celtics team and the potential this Celtics team holds. That's where the Celtics can be at the end of the season, going into the playoffs, the most important portion of the season. And Peyton Pritchard is such a big part of that. And yes, I do believe we've been a little bit tough on him during certain moments, expecting more of the sixth man of the year, all-star Peyton Pritchard. But really the consistency in its entirety this year has been there with Pritchard for the most part. And that's what's really important for the Celtics.
Here's my only frustration when it comes to Peyton Pritchard. Offensively, right? Him scoring the basketball. I'm not too interested in that. I love it. Don't get me wrong, right? I love it. I think it's very, very important for this team for him to give us that energy off the bench. Sometimes with Pritchard, and when my frustration grows, is when Pritchard is doing things like he did tonight, 8 rebounds, 10 assists, but he's only doing that when his offensive game is going. And I would really like to see Peyton Pritchard, contribute on the glass in the playmaking department on a consistent night. And that's something we see Derek White do so well. White, no matter if his shot is falling, is always making the right play and playing defense. And I think Pritchard relies a little bit too much on how his offensive game is going in order for him to do the other things. We never really see 6 points, 8 rebounds, 10 assists from Pritchard. There's a correlation between how much he's scoring the ball in the other components of his game and how those are doing. So moving forward, I just want to look for Pritchard to kind of be a little bit more of the energy guy off the bench, which he's done so well. But, don't let the offense dictate the outcome of the other assets of your game, because Pritchard has proven here this year, he's got a lot to offer, a lot to bring to the table. And I think they could come out more than they do this year.
And I'll add this real quick about Pritchard and the second chance points, because I didn't have the number going into the segment. But 26 second chance points for the Celtics tonight, a huge number. And Pritchard, what we're kind of talking about here, and Rob, what you're talking about too, is that Pritchard, he was a big part of those 26 second chance points tonight, grabbing those 8 rebounds. And that's what Peyton Pritchard can bring to the floor, is be that energetic spark plug away from not only scoring the ball from 3, he can really be a player in which is a playmaker and defensively is disrupting the entire team. And he almost is our TJ McConnell, but better than TJ McConnell in a sense.
5 offensive rebounds. Jeez.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. He's 6'1". We're facing a team that we looked at this year in the Indiana Pacers. Now, they're way below expectations. We should mention that. 2 games under 500 for the Pacers. I really don't think we're going to see them in the conference finals this year at all. Specifically, this Indiana team, I expect the Celtics to be there, but this Indiana team, they are really not playing well right now. But one thing that made people believe, specifically myself, believe this Indiana team was going to be better coming into this year was they're a lengthier, faster team than last year. And really, they should be better defensively than they were last year because of their length, because of all their big guys. Yet tonight, we see they give up 142 points to the Celtics, and they're letting 6'1" Peyton Pritchard grab 5 offensive rebounds on them, and they allow the Celtics 26 second chance points. So definitely something to look at for the Pacers for the entirety of their season, but also mentioning it with Peyton Pritchard as well. Super big in that category for this game.
Without a doubt. And you look at Pritchard and what he's done and what he can do. And someone I mentioned, Derek White, and we haven't talked an ill word on Derek White in a long time.
Blasphemy if we did.
Unfortunately, guys, I'm sorry, but that streak's over. We need to look at the struggle that Derek White is having here, especially from the offense end of the floor. Now, earlier this year, I brought up the idea that Derek White is no longer a facilitator and he's more of a 3-and-D wing. I'm seeing the facilitation, but in the process of Derek White trying to bring back that facilitation, guys, I think we're seeing that rust because he does not look as smooth and as clean. Derek White, for the past 2 years now, has been Mr. Reliable, right? Clutch game, you go to White. You can always trust the ball in Derek White's hands. I'm not going to lie, December, you don't trust the ball in Derek White's hands so much. You're seeing sloppy turnovers, bad shots, just uncharacteristic Derek White plays, guys. And I think it's time we kind of look into this and officially, I'm sorry, I'm saying it live on air. Guys, the highlighter's out. This is a pen, but let's act like it's a highlighter. Derek White, I'm sorry, you are officially highlighted.
No doubt. Go ahead, Franco.
I think we're going to see, as the dominoes fall for this team, as people start to pick up as a collective, that's usually when Derek White steps in the most, is when this team is all flowing. He's one of those flow state players. He's never been one to carry the team outside of a when Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum aren't performing to their standard. I think we're going to see that as time goes forward, especially during playoff time. That's when we know Derek White is at his most valuable, alongside Drew Holiday, who wasn't on the court tonight. They're two players who are players who don't need to really light up the stat sheet or not have the assists, the rebounds to be contributing on the court. I mean, Derek White is made up for it down low on the defensive end. He had a few blocks tonight, and they were very clutch ones as well. And I think that he's one of those players who we're going to be able to see once January, February starts to come around. Once we start reaching the dog is of this season, he'll be able to carry on the weight for this team and be able to get the contributions we're accustomed to seeing from him.
Where do I even start with Derek White? I know you guys were talking about offensively with Derek White, but I'm going to get to that in a second because defensively, Derek White has not been the same player defensively this season as he was last year. And some of it is just within the decision making, rotating defensively. We know how sound of a defender Derek White can be. And when he's at his peak, he's one of the best guard defenders in the entire league. We saw it in that Eastern Conference Finals series, specifically against the Indiana Pacers last year. Derek White was lights out in that series, yet went through it on film breakdown last post game show. That video's a very long video, but also the post game if you want to go hit the little thing in the bottom and go all the way to the end. It's at the end. So either go to the video or to the post game. I went through a film breakdown of the Celtics defensive lapses, and I didn't necessarily highlight the names too much, but a name that kept popping up was Derek White. And he, in that fourth quarter against the Philadelphia 76ers, he was the one missing defensive rotations, defensive assignments, not being in the correct position, not communicating. Now, of course, defense, it takes all five guys. So I'm not going to lay it solely on Derek White for the loss against the Philadelphia 76ers. But a person, a player who was consistently mentioned within all of those mistakes and mishaps the Celtics had against the Philadelphia 76ers was Derek White, because his primary focus, his primary matchup was Tyrese Maxey, and who was completely destroying the Celtics? Tyrese Maxey. So Derek White defensively has really not been up to the level, in my opinion, of where he can be. Now, we've seen good stretches from him, but there are moments where he's one of the players going through the motions. And what's just startling about that is Derek White is typically one of those players you do not expect to be going through the motions. You expect other guys like Tatum and Brown, oh yeah, sometimes as superstars they take a step back, but you typically see from the role players, or really the ultra, they're not even Derek White. Borderline last year, he was an all-star. So you hate to even say role player, but that's what he is on the Celtics team. Derek White is typically that player who's always bringing it on the floor, yet this season, too many lapses defensively and offensively. We've seen his game go to this level that I really don't think any of us saw coming in December last year, because look at his shot chart tonight. If we can get this kind of good on screen here, you notice any shots inside the 3-point arc tonight for Derek White?
Not one.
No. No. And that's what we talked about with Derek White last year and even this year on postgame, where we went, look, Derek White, because of the All-Star conversation last year, or really what put him in that All-Star conversation last year, was him driving to the rim, collapsing the defense, and even being a scorer inside the paint. Yet this season, we're seeing more of this from Derek White, where he goes 3 of 8 from the floor in for the whole game, and all 8 shots are from 3, all of them. And not one, you look at this again, not one is a corner 3. And corner 3s, they are the most efficient shot in the entire NBA. They equal 3 points, and they're hit at a high clip because guys, of course, when they drive from the top of the key, if you have your ball handler, a superstar player, whoever it is, they collapse the defense, make everybody help, and that wide open corner 3 becomes an efficient shot because it's typically not that heavily of a defended shot. Well, Derek White, he's not even creating those shots within the offense right now. Now, that's really where he's at on the offensive end of the floor. If you're sticking him in the corner, if he's at the top of the key handling the ball more. But you see some of these threes, they're just coming from the wing or really near the top of the key, and he's just jacking them. And we really see it within the offense that Derek White, he'll touch the ball, and what I don't like to see is it seems like every time he touches the ball right now, it's just throw up a 3, throw up a 3, throw up a 3, and it feels like it's a quick trigger. When I want to see the offense progress a little bit more. Now, he did have 6 assists tonight, and that is more of the bright spot for Derek White. And you do see moments of facilitation. We saw it in Orlando when Jason Tatum was out of the lineup, but jacking the threes, not going to the rim, not getting the points in the paint, and really he's more of a 3-and-D type of player this year without some of the D. Derek White has been just, I hate to say it, he's been one of the more disappointing Celtics this entire season, and we won't talk too negatively about him because we still believe in Derek White's ability, because he's not only this guy who is supposed to be a physical monster on the floor, which he's not really compared to the rest of the league. He's more of that heady player. So we know he has the brain in order to bring himself along to where he needs to be. And we've seen it in the past many, many times for the last 2.5 seasons with the Celtics. So we still believe Derek White can get up to that level. But as I said, coming into this season, or as I appeared here on Postgame in November, feels like Derek White over the summer. Maybe a little bit too much celebration, maybe too many ales over the off season. Didn't quite come into season in shape. Went to the Olympics, of course, played with the Olympic squad, but came into the season maybe not so ready to go. And of course, we were going to give him a pass because we all love Derek White, and Kristaps Porzingis is kissing his head, and all the women and even the men out there love his cute smile and Derek White's personality. So we give him a little bit of a leeway and a little bit of a, we let him go a little bit, overlook some of these things. But when it really comes down to it, what he's doing on the basketball floor, they have to be at a higher level than where they're at right now. We still believe Derek White's going to come around, but at this point in time in December, he's been one of the more disappointing Celtics this season, because he is he's part of what makes the entire Celtics machine drive, of course, alongside Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Really, those 3 players, White, Holiday, Porzingis, they are the next 3 after Brown and Tatum, who just make this team a different animal. If we don't see them going, that's when the concerns come around for the Celtics. But of course, still believe in them. But right now, we got to see more. Got to see a little bit more.
I think it's a prime example of why the regular season matters. You can't just, this style of play that we're seeing from Derek White will hurt the Celtics come April when the possessions get more important and the game slows down. The type of shots he's generating aren't good playoff shots. And, he is shooting, I believe, the highest clip on open spot up jump shots. Like, I don't want that asset of his game to go away, but he needs to start getting in the paint. You're so right. It's what made him and really the Celtics team so dynamic last year. We haven't seen it to even the slightest this year. And honestly, the fact that we're mentioning it 31 games in is pretty poor on our part, because it has been a problem I've noticed here for about a month, is just the lackluster contributions from Derek White. And a lot of it is just a little bit of effort from him, getting into the paint, getting to the free throw line, he has one of the best floaters in the NBA and we aren't seeing it. And, again, that is why you need to practice the little things now and get the good habits down in the regular season. Because come playoff time, if Derek White realizes, okay, my shot's not there, I got to give this team something else, you will have gone now 8 months of the regular season without doing any of that. And it's not going to be nearly at the level in which you need it to be, and the Celtics team needs it to be, in order for them to make a run again, to go back to back.
Do you think that comes down to the game planning of the Boston Celtics this year? Because it definitely seems like they're focusing a lot more on Tatum and Brown instead of almost spreading the rock out a little bit more evenly like we were seeing last year. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of that as the team continues to progress.
I don't know if it's the rock not getting spread around, and more so that somebody on the staff, kind of like what Sam Cassell did with Jason Tatum in getting him back into the post and operating within that asset of his game. Somebody on this coaching staff needs to say, okay, Derek, listen, you need to get back into this situation. These opportunities are the opportunities we need to get you in, because Mazzulla and his staff are big analytic guys. Well, you want some analytics, go look at how efficient Derek White is of a scorer last season within the paint. He's very efficient at scoring in there. The Celtics, I think they need to do a much better job, and the staff in particular, at getting Derek White those opportunities.
No doubt. And this season too has just felt like more of a roller coaster ride than last season at this point in time, because I even think what affects it is not only game plan and the way Derek White has played within himself, but just the inconsistent personnel across the board with the Celtics. Last year, it felt like we saw the same starting five every single night, saw the same guys coming off the bench in the same rotation. Yet this year, tonight, look who's not there. Kristaps Porzingis rolls his ankle on Christmas, isn't around. Drew Holiday dealing with a shoulder issue right now, didn't play on Christmas, didn't play tonight. And when you have two of those important players out of the lineup, the priority of who's getting the shots and who's getting the assists and who is playing what role, both offensively and defensively, it shifts around a little bit. And I do believe that's affecting the Celtics more so this season than it ever did last season. We did see stretches where where players missed games last year, yet it wasn't really coming at this weird inconsistent rate we're seeing this year, because now we didn't see Kristaps Porzingis for the first 17 games. Tatum has missed a couple of games this month that we don't really expect him to miss. Drew Holiday's missed a couple of games. Horford, of course, is sitting every back-to-back. Porzingis is sitting every back-to-back as well. And even Derek White, we've seen him miss a couple of games. We saw Derek White and Jaylen Brown not even play in the Cleveland game, which, looking back, that's just so funny how we didn't highlight that entirely that night, because we said we're still supposed to beat the Cavaliers up 12 in the third quarter going into the fourth, and we should have won that game. But when you have those kind of absences, that will affect a team throughout a season. And a prime example for that, and really an extreme example for that, was the 2020-21 Celtics, where in the COVID year, half the team was going out every other game. And the lineup, I believe, through the first 40 games, there were 30-something different starting lineups. And that team at the end of the season not once gained any ounce of consistency throughout the year. And no matter what team you are, whether you're this dominant Celtics team or that lackluster 21 Celtics team, you're going to be affected by a lack of consistency within lineups throughout the season when guys' roles are shifting all over the board. Now, there's still time for the Celtics to gain more of that consistency moving forward, and we still believe from the continuity gained last year, the Celtics team does have a little bit of an edge compared to some other teams winning a ring, going through that run they did in the playoffs last year, and even the dominant season before that, the regular season before that. Yet the Celtics, they still need to see consistent personnel on a night-to-night basis in order to achieve what they eventually want to achieve later on in the season, which is going back to back. And if we do not see that consistency, it's going to hamper this Celtics team, including Derek White, as we've seen so far.
I think that you talk about that, the inconsistency of the lineup. And another prime example of that is just the other night against Orlando, Tatum sits. And in a game in which, again, you don't have the luxury of doing that right now. If we're in, February and we're the 1 seed and we're about 8 games ahead of the next guy and we're playing really good basketball and it's working, you think to yourself, okay, this was smart, save those legs. But we're not playing at the level we need to. You can't afford for these key pieces. Kristaps is kind of the only one I'm okay with. Holiday a little bit because I think again that rest benefits him. I don't think the rest benefits Jason Tatum much. I mean, he knock on wood, he has been a career. I mean, one of the best things about Jason Tatum is his availability. Same with Jaylen Brown, same with Derek White. So I agree with that point where it's like, listen, you don't have that luxury right now if you're the Boston Celtics, just to not play guys against teams if they're not truly hurt.
Well, what's also coming up, I'll add this before you can go after me, Franco. Well, I'll add this to the availability thing too, and the fact the Celtics can't do this right now. Number one, like you said, Rob, they're not in a number 1 seed position ahead of everybody else. Number two, they're not playing consistently at all as a team right now. Except, hopefully this game can be the first kind of building block towards that. Yet number three, this is really starting to leak into the conversation. The Celtics are getting everybody's best shot on every night now because they're the defending champions. And they cannot just breeze past teams like the Orlando Magic without Boncaro and Wagner. They just cannot, because these teams, even without some of their best players, and even the bad teams we think are bad teams, you look at the entire league, there are not really any bad teams right now. Even the teams in the lower tier of the league,
Except
you
Washington.
still look, they have a couple. Washington's the really one team where you go, what is going on here? But even them, they have Valanciunas and Brogdon. They have Poole, Kuzma, Kispert. They have a couple of things going for them. They just cannot gather wins at all, and they look completely discombobulated as a unit. But some other teams, you think about the Hornets, yeah, there's LaMelo Ball right there. There's Miles Bridges down on that squad. Now, they're not the best squad in the world at all, but they have a couple of near all-star level players, and that's pretty much every team in the league right now, aside from maybe the Wizards, the Trailblazers, a couple of really most teams have good role players and stars, and it's really their unit that just cannot get it together, whether it's offensively or defensively, whatever it is. And the Celtics, the availability thing right now, I don't want to say it's concerning, but if you really think about it, what we just said here, it's okay for Porzingis to kind of sit out and whatnot because it seems like he's a little injury prone. I think that's safe to say at this point in his career. Holiday, he's a little bit older. Maybe the rest benefits him. Horford too. But you think about the two biggest acquisitions of the Celtics last year. It was Holiday and Porzingis. Without Holiday and Porzingis, isn't this team just kind of a carcass of what the 22, 23 Celtics were? Because think, we ship off Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, and Robert Williams, and even Grant Williams, let him go. Those 4 players are gone. You can say whatever you want about them, but they contributed to the squad. You replace them with Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and now the production we're seeing out of Peyton Pritchard and even Sam Hauser as well. But when you take Drew Holiday and take Kristaps Porzingis and even Al Horford on some nights out of the mix, the team, they start to look like even a lesser team than what the 22-23 squad was. So it's important to have all these players in the lineup, but it's also important to have them in the lineup in the most important portion of the season. So that's really the balance the Celtics have to find right now, is when to sit these players out, or when is the right time to actually go out and build those good habits, and of course to rest some of the older players or more injury prone players, in which we're going to need regardless at the end of the season. But sorry, go ahead, Franco.
Yeah, no, the Celtics, you pretty much hit on the points that I was planning on hitting, but the Celtics are very fortunate to have their 2 star players be as available as they have been, and they're also still in some ripe ages in their careers, so I don't think we'll be seeing that as a factor anytime soon. Lord forbid that an injury happens. However, we look at the Boston Celtics and we look at what Joe Mazzulla said before the season started, was he doesn't want the red dot on his back. He wants it right in the middle of his forehead. And they should have been expecting this and should expect this for the rest of the season. What I have a flashback to when we're having this conversation is, I believe it was 2015, 2016, when we beat those unholy Warriors who were, I believe, on track to have their best season of all time, and we got that one win, and it felt like the NBA Finals for us. Every single team in the NBA feels that same way about us. The Isaiah Thomas, Avery Bradley led team who's just scrappy, fighting for whatever they can get, and I think we're gonna get used to that, especially when playoff time comes around, because we're seeing teams like Cleveland starting to step up, and we're seeing the Atlanta's starting to play well, and I think the playoff Eastern playoff picture is going to look a lot different than it has in recent years. So we're going to be seeing a lot of new, fresh looks, and teams have been consistently improving. And teams, we look around the NBA, no NBA GM looks at their roster and says, "Oh, I did a bad job of putting together this team." There is something on every
That's
single
for the
NBA
Wizards.
roster. Yeah.
Especially the Kings
Hey,
right now, apparently so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they both.
Mike Brown.
Yeah, that was a tough cutting, but they made the additions that they wanted to make. They added DeMar DeRozan, so they were hoping to have a playoff run and continue to light the beam out there in Sacramento. However, it didn't seem to work out. I believe injuries may have contributed to that. And you also look at the Wizards; they were adding veteran talent when they're supposed to be a young, developing team. They were eating a lot of contracts. They were taking up trades. I don't even know why they would sign a Giannis Valanciunas going into this season when he should be playing for a contender right now. And I'm sure he's going to be traded
He'll be shipped
within the
off.
next two. He'll be shipped off within the next 2 months. But every team has made their valid arguments to be able to. How can we compete with a team like the Boston Celtics? And we're fortunate to not have a team of star players like a Kawhi Leonard or a Joel Embiid who is dealing with injuries and taking their time to get back on the court. And the Celtics have done a good job of taking, when that happens, being able to adapt and being able to curate around the situations, because you just look at the amount of talent that this roster has. Someone on this team is bound to step up, even if in the bad situation that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum wanted a night off, we still have other players that we can confidently say will be able to put up 20 plus points in that situation.
Well, Joe Mazzulla asked for the red dot in between their eyes, and they got that red dot in between their eyes. And real quick before we move on to the next game, we play against Indiana, what we would expect to see there. I just want to say that this is what is so hard about repeating in today's NBA. The league is adapting at an all-time pace, that teams are seeing what the team that just won the championship did, and they're replicating it, and they're adjusting instantly. And there's instant moves to be made. And teams are willing to move picks with this new cap, with this new bracket. I mean, the players are on the fly instantly. And that is kind of what is so difficult about repeating in today's NBA, guys. But before we close off the show, we got another mini series here against Indiana back at home. A lot of what we've talked about this post-game show is building blocks, right? And carrying it over. So what's kind of your most important thing you want to see Boston carry over?
I think that being able to maintain the solid start, and obviously we would love to see a wire-to-wire win like they had tonight. But if they can win the first half of basketball and be able to maintain that during the second half, hopefully we'll be seeing both teams a little bit more healthy. I think we'll most likely see Kristaps, and I don't know to what extent his injury alongside Drew Holiday's is. I don't know if that's going to lead to them missing multiple games or just taking this one night off. And if we look on the other side, we look at the Indiana Pacers, they'll be in a much healthier spot if Nemhard or Neesmith are healthy. But the Pacers aren't going to be a team that are just going to roll over and be like, okay, we're going to let the Celtics sweep this mini series and head back. So I'm expecting a lot more of a competitive effort from the Indiana Pacers going into Sunday. And I'm just hoping that we can continue to get those performances out of Jason Tatum. Will probably have a good performance, and it would be nice to see someone outside of the three people that we've seen in the spotlight on multiple occasions, JB, JT, and also Peyton Pritchard now, have a performance worthy of being in our player spotlight.
Well, tonight's game, considering the 2-game series, tonight's game was the easier of the two because tonight's game was a schedule loss for the Indiana Pacers. You look at the recent stretch, they went on a 5-game win streak. 4 of those games were out on the West Coast. They come home to Indianapolis. They play the Oklahoma City Thunder, one of the best teams in the NBA. They lose a close one to OKC last night, and then they have to fly to Boston halfway across the country to play a back-to-back against the Boston Celtics. That schedule right there is tough for the Indiana Pacers, going West Coast to home, playing the Thunder, and then flying halfway across the country to the other coast, the East Coast, to play the Celtics. You know, you're talking about playing 2 of the top 3 teams in the NBA with coast-to-coast flights involved in between. That's partially why we saw some of the lackluster effort from the Indiana Pacers we saw tonight, because looking at who was out of the lineup, Andrew Nembhard, who destroyed the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals last year, didn't destroy him enough to get a win, but we all know how good he was in that series regardless. And Aaron Nesmith as well, former Celtic, drafted by the Celtics in the lottery. You know the motivation he brings to every single Celtics game. He gave the Celtics a loss in Indiana last year in early January. We came on here and analyzed that after post game. We just thought, oh my, I cannot believe we lost that game. And it was really all due to Aaron Nesmith. Yet this next game, if both those players play and Indiana, they're going to be in Boston for 3 straight nights. Now they're still on the road, but this is not necessarily, again, not a home game for the Indiana Pacers, but the way that this 2-game series aligns, where the Indiana Pacers are staying in the same city 3 nights in a row, there's a lot more rest. It's almost a pseudo home matchup for themselves because it's, oh, we've stayed in the same place night after night after night. And of course, they're not going to have the same fan base whatsoever. Celtic fan base is still going to come around. Don't get me wrong, folks. That's going to make it a road game for the Pacers. But in terms of the rest, it's almost more of a home rest, if you want to call it that, for the Indiana Pacers. So Pacers might have more players available and also more motivation from the fact of they won 5 straight games coming into these last 2 games. And now the Indiana Pacers, we talked about the Celtics earlier tonight. We're trying to avoid losing 3 straight games. Well, after the Pacers won 5 in a row, now the Pacers are trying to avoid losing 3 straight games. So the Pacers, there's going to be a lot of things going for Indiana on what night is it? See, we never know the nights of the week here.
Sunday
On
night.
Sunday night. So this is a weekend series here. Friday night here. A lot more going for the Pacers on Sunday than Friday tonight. So the Celtics, to continuously put those building blocks one on top of the other, they're going to have to come out in that game and really play the way they played early tonight and throughout this matchup, because the Celtics, this was the response that we wanted to see from this Boston Celtics team after the recent horrendous stretch we saw going into Christmas, including the Christmas Day game against the Philadelphia 76ers. We're hoping this is the wake-up call the Celtics needed, but right now, the Celtics team cannot become complacent because they're facing the same opponent with more going for the opponent on Sunday. And the Celtics, if they come out with another dud, we're going to be right back to where we were in terms of conversing about the Celtics back against the Magic, against the Bulls, and even after the Philadelphia 76ers game. We don't want to be back in that spot. We want to put another building block on top of the other one and really gain more confidence in this team moving ahead, because that's what this team needs right now. The Celtics, of course, being that team.
Without a doubt, building blocks, continue to rebound, continue to get good shots. I don't care if it's an open 2 or an open 3. Just get good shots. Too much attention goes into that. If it's open, I like the shot. I think Boston, again, this is a must-win game for Boston. And the next couple, I think I label as must-win. We know they can bounce back. We know they can beat the Pacers at home by 25 points. That's not a surprise. What we're looking for out of this team, and we're not sure right now that they can do, we're pretty sure. We've seen it last year, but this is a new year. We are looking for them to string together a month of good basketball. They started 16-4. That was good. Since they've been meh. And I want to see better than meh because we're the Boston Celtics. We're the defending NBA champions. However, guys, the Celtics, they're going to face off yet again against the Indiana Pacers this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern time tip-off. Thank you, NBA. I love the 6 p.m. tip-offs. You get out, you're early over on our side. You know, it's a little bit later or earlier, so you can kind of, you know, it just is a little bit more refreshing. So shout out the NBA for that Sunday 6 o'clock start. Guys, after that final buzzer sounds, come right back here to the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel, and we'll have you covered for post-game live. Guys, the Celtics tonight, they got back on track after that Christmas disaster against those grinchy Philadelphia 76ers. The Celtics winning 142-105 back at the TD Garden. Jaylen Brown was your player spotlight, guys. 44 points, 5 rebounds to go alongside 4 steals in a very efficient 16-24. Guys, wait, before I end, Seamus, you got any more cookies for us tonight or no?
I do not, but hey, for the people who missed the cookies against the Orlando Magic, I was going to show them on Christmas, but of course we weren't around. Here's the CTW cookie again.
Boom.
Has not been eaten yet.
Well,
So there you go. Maybe
we got to make a wager. Like, what would be a
Drop
good
it.
wager for when you should take a bite out of that cookie?
Save it till we win the finals.
Celtics go on a 10-game winning streak, although
I
I
like
feel
that.
like that might
like
be a little
that.
old.
I like that. I like that.
Might be a little old. Like, oh, it's February right now. Oh, geez. Like, oh, the month-old cookie.
Somebody
Potato
comment.
cookie again might be somewhere. We don't know.
Somebody commented.
Don't know.
What needs to happen in order for Seamus to eat that cookie? Whatever the top comment is, if we can get any.
Yeah, we got to get this blanket in here. Look at this Franco blanket.
There we go.
We got to get a real one made. Merch.
We do. We
Gotta get a
do.
real one made.
We'll work on that in our production value. We'll talk to the accountants.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and watching, guys. Come on. You know the drill. Cue the music. Cue the music.